Get ready with Storm Watch 2018.
Hello, and welcome to WTOC's First Alert Storm Watch 2018. We all know our area has been impacted by several storms the past couple of hurricane seasons. Tonight, the First Alert Storm Team takes a look back at those past storms to help you better prepare for what may come in the future. Combined with high tide, Irma's flood effects were felt by those living near the water even more, and not necessarily on the ocean. Sean Evans and Cutter Martin following up with one longtime Coffee Bluff resident to see how the recovery effort has been for her, and we're even learning 8 months later there's still a lot to do.
Never have any of these people that have lived here for 40 years have never seen anything like this.
Water from high tide was pushed even further inland by Irma's wind, surging onto the roads in some areas, making travel impossible for hours around parts of the Coffee Bluff community. When Elaine Harris's family called to check on her and realized her home was not only surrounded by water, but it was starting to come inside, Water Rescue came to help. Now, despite the danger, Harris says she was never worried.
I'm not frightened, and I don't see, unless I get out here and do something crazy, that anything's going to happen. So they left me alone.
You said when they came up, the rescue crew, that the water was about waist level, right?
Yes, it was. It was.
The rising water flooded the first floor of her home, ruining furniture and creating a breeding ground for mold that had to be thoroughly cleaned out. 8 months later, renovations were still underway. Still without AC.
Still without AC.
And you still have this moving container out here also. That's been here from pretty much the get-go, I know, when we followed up with you.
The first day, a lot of the furniture that was just slightly damp, they put in there to dry out and had fans and so on, and most of it's still there.
Harris says she's made do, even creating an apartment-like space on her second floor, but she admits the fixes to her home of more than 50 years have taken much longer than she hoped they would. Still, she's committed to staying put and carries with her a new appreciation for the power a storm like Irma can bring.
Water, wind, and isolated tornadoes all impact, so we must consider when a tropical storm system approaches our area. But your location determines your greatest risk. A coastal zone, the one typically impacted the most during a landfalling tropical system. We are watching closely for the risk of flooding, whether it come from storm surge or rainfall. Traditionally speaking, you run from the water, that's evacuation, and you hide from the wind. Destructive winds still possible in this zone, and we can be talking about extended power outages because of that wind. Isolated tornadoes typically your lowest risk, as they only impact a few folks, even in the strongest hurricanes. Working our way further inland, north and west of the city of Savannah, it is about flooding, in this case rainfall flooding, that is going to be you and your family's, your property's greatest risk. Destructive winds are still possible in this area, but typically a little bit weaker than those felt at the coastline, and yes, isolated tornadoes too possible across our first of two inland zones. Going a little bit further to the north and west now, we are watching communities from Sylvania, Screven County down to Waycross for rainfall flooding, specifically river flooding in the days or weeks after a storm system moves by. Damaging winds still possible, especially with the strongest storm systems in this area as well, and in addition to isolated tornadoes. So remember, to keep you, your family, your property safe in the next hurricane season, all of those to come, you need to know your greatest risk.
So let's break down a very historical 2017 hurricane season. We had 17 named storms. We made it to R, Rena. 10 were hurricanes, 6 were major, and 3 major hurricanes made landfall in America after a 12-year drought of no major hurricanes making landfall in the United States. And then you say, well, what about Matthew? That was a Category 2. It has to be Category 3 or higher to become major. So you see the track of Harvey, Irma, and then Maria off the eastern seaboard. But let's talk about 10. It wasn't even named. Potential Tropical Cyclone 10. Yeah, and it did some beach erosion in Hilton Head, Tybee, and the Golden Isles. And it had wind gusts up to 50 miles an hour. So just because it's not named doesn't mean we don't take it seriously.
During Hurricane Irma, we have reporters embedded all over the coastal empire and the low country, including our own Elizabeth Rollins right here on Tybee Island. Tonight, she takes a look back at all the places she showed you during her 36 hours of live coverage right here on the island.
Life on Tybee Island is alive and thriving. You would never know that just 9 months ago, this place was deserted. Homes and businesses were boarded up. bracing for Hurricane Irma. During the storm, we were hunkered down on the north end of the island. When it was finally safe to start assessing the damage, one of our first stops was Lewis Avenue, which was under several feet of water.
Water in your dressers, in your clothes.
Homes on this street also flooded during Hurricane Matthew. The day after Irma, we toured the island with Mayor Jason Buelterman. 9 months later, the mayor tells me the overall recovery cost for the city was only a couple of $100,000 compared to the $3 million from Matthew. But he says Irma hit individual pockets much harder.
Matthew was a significant debris removal issue. Irma was a whole lot sadder.
The wind damage that was caused from Irma was concentrated down near the pier, but getting there meant navigating through Irma's waters. When the surge finally hit during high tide, it flooded many of the roads around the island, including the main road here, Butler Avenue. In fact, this is as far as we could get for about 24 hours. It wasn't until the very next day that we could finally get down to the main strip to assess the damage. The roofs on some of the condos facing the beach were damaged, and some were completely ripped off, causing significant water damage to units inside. But many residents and business owners realized the damage could have been a lot worse if it wasn't for the dunes. But after back-to-back storms, now there's not much of a buffer between the beach and the island. The mayor says they've already secured state funding to replace the dunes that were destroyed, but the effort to rebuild them will be ongoing during this hurricane season. For residents, this is just another reason to pray for peace.
We need a break this year.
When they said it was hurricane season the other day, you just cringe.
Reporting on Tybee, Elizabeth Rollins, WTOC News.
Well, it's officially hurricane season, and we've already had one named storm. Now, on average, we have 12 named storms, 6 of those being hurricanes, 3 of those being intense. The researchers at Colorado State are calling for a slightly above average number of named storms at 14, average number of hurricanes, and slightly below average number of intense or major hurricanes. NOAA has a little bit of a wider range, 10 to 16 named storms, 5 to 9 hurricanes, 1 to 4 of those being intense. So, breaking this down by coast, on the East Coast, there is a 39% chance of a major hurricane making landfall. That's up 8% from average. And on the Gulf Coast, also 8% above average there as well. Now, no matter what happens this hurricane season, the First Alert WTOC weather team is going to be here to keep you safe.
Does this look familiar? It's the dreaded cone of uncertainty that we hear about every hurricane season. And this year, the National Hurricane Center is making some changes to the cone. So what exactly is the cone? Well, the cone has nothing to do with the size and the forecast and the intensity of the storm. This is important to know because many storm effects can occur well outside the center of that cone. It is solely based on where the center of the storm may go. Now, the cone is actually made up of circles that correspond to different forecast times. When you connect those circles, you actually get the cone. The diameter of each circle represents the 2/3 forecast error of the previous 5 years. What that means is the center of the storm should stay within those circles 60 to 70% of the time. Each year, the Hurricane Center reviews their forecast errors and adjusts the size of the circles. For 2018, the cone size and the size of the circles will shrink about 6%. As technology improves and forecasts get more accurate, the cone will continue to shrink. Besides the last 2 years here, it's been quiet for quite some time. But Carter Martin takes a look back at how many historic storms have actually hit our area. And speaking of historic, this blue Dodge Charger was unlike anything you've probably seen on River Street. Jamie Ertl explains why the Savannah River reached such high levels during Hurricane Irma.
Before the Woods Memorial Bridge, Waterfront Park, the outlets in Beaufort County, there were major storms. 1893, 1940, and 1959, all years with significant hurricane hits.
This 1893 storm is still the 5th most deadly storm in the United States of America. So, I mean, it's sort of forgotten, but it's incredibly important. The next storm that's really significant to the local people was the hurricane of 1940. Even in 1940, there were 10 drownings. And I guess the third most famous one, until Matthew, of course, well, now everybody's here, is Gracie. The National Guardsmen, of course, were here and running checkpoints. This is the brick church that's out by Penn Center that's now part of the Reconstruction Era National Monument.
When you look at how bad it can be, it really makes you just step back and say, number one, we're very lucky. We need to be very thankful.
Yes, we are.
Number two, eventually that luck will run out. So we have to be, extremely careful. Reporting in Beaufort, Cutter Martin, WTOC News.
So River Street's calm right now. We're at low tide, but we went through 2 high tide cycles during Hurricane Irma. And I think just you being down here showing people the infamous
Blue Dodge
Challenger.
I don't know, I've never seen anything like that before on a river. There were waves crashing over onto it. So we saw the water get really high and then just sort of continue to get really high and flood for a while, but I don't think we really understood what was going on. And can you kind of, break that down for us?
Let me go to the studio and try to explain storm surge a little bit better for you. We put a little graphic together talking about storm surge, and what that is, it's the water piling up on top of the tides. And with Irma, the tides are running high because of the king tides and the moon phase. So watch as we predict a 3-foot storm surge above the tidal cycle. So depending on the elevation of where you live, a 3-foot storm surge may not encroach your home. Don't think of it as, okay, well, 3 feet is right here. It's the 3 feet of elevation. And what is your elevation? Best thing to look at is the Chatham County flood maps. Now, if we're talking about a 6-foot storm surge, that may definitely encroach your home and your property. And then a 12-foot storm surge is devastating. So from 3 to 6 feet can mean a world of difference depending on your elevation. And once again, check the Chatham County flood maps, and we have that at WTOC.com.
Flooding not just here in Savannah. WTOC went back to McIntosh County where they still have unrepaired damage from Irma 8 months ago. Hurricane Irma brought rain and winds like few storms we've seen. Bureau Chief Dal Kennedy returned to McIntosh County to see how some folks are still struggling to get back to their feet.
Robert Everson has lived across the marsh from Sapelo Island all his life. Nothing could have prepared him for what Hurricane Irma would bring.
Irma had a southeast about 70 miles an hour, and it was blowing directly toward me. Brought everything out of the ocean in this yard.
Just up the road, Damon Winters and his wife live in the game warden house. Flooding and damage kept them out until April.
With the marsh mud that was in here, I guess it's in the water and just settles as it goes back out. After the 3rd tide cycle, it didn't come back in the home anymore, but it had done its job by then. It had totally destroyed everything in the house.
Rains and tides teamed to bring debris further in than anyone could remember.
Matthew caused us a lot of wind damage, but this one caused the wind damage and the flood inundation. We had the wrong tides coming, or the right tides for Irma.
It's been 115 years since water was that high up here.
Some damage has taken longer to repair than others. Popple and other county leaders finally secured a pledge from FEMA this month to fix a road nearly washed away by Irma.
Obviously, there wasn't enough money to fix the road that they were talking about reimbursing us for. It's going to take substantially more than that.
Does it sometimes feel like you're haggling over the price of a used car?
Definitely.
Popple says the community still has other repairs to make to finally put Irma behind them.
Folks seem to share 2 sentiments. 1, they had never seen damage like Irma brought here. And 2, they hope they never see it again. In McIntosh County, Dal Kennedy, WTOC News.
Storm surge is a threat along the coast, but tornadoes can impact communities as far as over 100 miles away from a hurricane's center of circulation. Now, that's something Liberty County is familiar with.
Over the past few years, we've seen tornadoes coming through our county, coming through Fort Stewart, Liberty County, so we're always concerned about that.
Tornadoes are commonly associated with thunderstorms, but they are also typical within most tropical systems. In 2016, Hermine produced 2 EF1 tornadoes in the coastal empire. These tornadoes uprooted trees and damaged structures in Liberty and Chatham County. Since seeing the damage firsthand, Logan believes his community takes the threat of tornadoes even more seriously than in years past.
People begin to realize that when we call the alarm for evacuation, even though it may not seem it's going to happen here in Liberty County, it can happen.
Despite not taking a direct hit over the past few years, Logan assures me that their emergency management agency and law enforcement officials are prepared to work together if a storm impacts them this season.
Cities across the Southeast lost power from Hurricane Irma. We'll show you how power companies are working to make sure you're not stuck sitting in the dark. 1 million homes were without power in Georgia and South Carolina after Hurricane Irma. Our Crystal Howard talked to power providers in both states to see how they're planning for this hurricane season.
We all know how quickly it can be lights out when a hurricane or even a summer storm hits.
There you go.
But power companies say they're ready.
We're on so you can be. And that's really true. It's a 24/7 operation for us.
Georgia Power and Palmetto Electric in South Carolina don't let these storms into their service area without a plan and extra resources from other states. They told me they prepare big, even if the storm ends up small. It's a gamble they have to take.
We've taken the lessons that we've learned over the last two storms, looked at our emergency operations plan, tweaked it, rewrote a lot of it, and focusing on what we learned, the good and the bad.
During and after Hurricane Matthew, 141,000 customers out of roughly 144,000 were without power in Savannah. And the outages were even greater when you look at the Georgia coast as a whole. 272,000 customers were without service.
This will very quickly kind of give you that big picture like, oh, God, we have, all this out.
Georgia Power showed me how they restore power on large-scale outages caused by storms. That process includes knowing every nook and cranny of the city and also being flexible.
That's why we have kind of the plans and the structures, and we kind of change them as needed. But as far as, preparing for us, it's really more of, just letting folks know that we are monitoring the weather.
And if an outage does happen and your power isn't back on as quick as lightning, this may be why. Power companies work by priority when big events like hurricanes happen.
We want to make sure that the hospital, the police station, the people that are going to provide a first responder situation that we would give, we'll get their power on first.
After Hurricane Matthew and Irma, Palmetto Electric is taking preparation a step further. 95% of their lines are now underground, and they expect it to be 100% by the end of the year. And while we don't know what Mother Nature may bring, here are some tips we've put together for you. Don't touch power lines, report outages and down trees. And you want to also remember to have a family plan because you may not have power for a few days. You can also follow your power companies on social media for updates. Crystal Howard, WTOC News.
If you've been through the last two storms, you know that when the evacuation order goes into effect, it's time to go. Unfortunately, not everyone is able to get out. But if you plan in advance, you can get help. Here's our Syria Samlin.
The Georgia Department of Public Health wants you to know about the Hurricane Registry for those with functional, access, or medical needs.
It's less stress on a person that has medical and disabled needs.
Frankie Vaz is a diabetic who has trouble getting around. She signed up for the Hurricane Registry during both Irma and Matthew.
I've been on the registry now for 3 years, and everything's been wonderful.
Emergency health officials want the entire coastal empire to know who is eligible to sign up for this registry. Tammy Brown, Chatham County Nurse Manager, explains.
It's a registry for Chatham County residents who have either a medical need or a functional need. By functional, I mean if they need some assistance with their activities of daily living to maintain their independence in a shelter.
The district then partners with the state to decide where those residents will go.
We work with our district office, who works with the state office, to find placement. So we arrange the transportation, and then the state will, based on the availability, decide what type of facility the residents will go to. It could be a hospital, it could be an inpatient hospice, it could be a nursing home.
Vaz went to Augusta for the last two storms and could not ask for a better experience.
The ride there and all is smooth. We have a police escort there and back, so it's wonderful, and everybody comes together. If you forgot something, they try to make it possible to get it for you.
The big message from county officials: sign up now before it's too late.
If you meet the requirements for a functional access medical need, now's the time to be registered. If the hurricane's coming and you're trying to get on the registry, it may be too late at that point.
Because at a certain point, you won't be able to get the help you need.
The cutoff for the registry is 72 hours prior to the onset of tropical storm force winds arrival.
And Vaz says she is forever grateful for this service and everyone who makes it possible.
I will continue to go as long as I'm alive. I will continue to go to Augusta because they're just wonderful, wonderful people.
You can go online, download this application, and take it with you to the health department, or you can apply over the phone.
Let me show you what you need to know about our WTOC weather app. Go directly to Settings, then select Edit Locations. There you choose the home location, and if you need to evacuate, you can select Follow Me. Next, select WTOC Alerts to receive alerts directly from the WTOC weather team. Make sure weather alert types and alert sounds are turned on. At the top, you get a personalized weather video from the First Alert weather team. Next, Live Radar gives you the option to view what you want to see by clicking the Layers button. Next, we have your hour-by-hour, a 10-day forecast, and the ability to watch WTOC live. The WTOC weather app is a great tool to help keep you informed during the upcoming hurricane season.
Thanks for watching WTOC's First Alert Storm Watch 2018. From the entire WTOC First Alert weather team, good night.